What's going on, guys? We have a lot to talk about. A lot of Bitcoin miners this month are reporting earnings. We're also going to talk about some Bitcoin news. We have Hong Kong, Ether, and Bitcoin spot ETFs starting trading tomorrow. And we also have news of Australian spot Bitcoin ETFs coming potentially by the end of this year. So let's get started. First, we'll look at the Bitcoin news, and then we'll go over Bitcoin miners, what I'll be watching for this week and the coming weeks. And I'm sure there's going to be a miner that I missed that has upcoming earnings, so let me know in the comments below which miners you're going to be watching for. And first off, this Australian spot Bitcoin ETF news. According to this Bloomberg report cited by people familiar with the matter, Australian Securities Exchange could approve spot Bitcoin ETFs before 2024's end. And at least two entities have applied with the Australian Stock Exchange, Australian Security Exchange, and another is working towards it. So there's this local entity, Digital X Limited, that applied in February. We also had Van Eck that resubmitted an application in February. And Sydney-based BetaShares told Bloomberg it's working towards launching a product on the Australian Securities Exchange as well. Now, the ASX, or Australian Securities Exchange, accounts for 90% of Australia's equity market. And we also had news from earlier this month that Australia-based Monochrome Asset Management applied for a spot Bitcoin ETF with the Global Listing Exchange, CBOE Australia. Now, CBOE Australia is a smaller rival of ASX, and seeing that ASX accounts for 90% of the market, I'm assuming this other stock exchange holds 10%. But you know, we're seeing more and more countries getting into these spot Bitcoin ETFs. We had the US approve them this year, we have Hong Kong starting trading supposedly tomorrow, and we have Australia potentially by the end of this year. And I want to remind you that Grayscale and IBIT are so close to flipping. Soon, BlackRock's IBIT will flip Grayscale's GBTC, and right now they're about 1.5 billion away from each other. Current assets under management for Grayscale is 19.05 billion, and BlackRock's IBIT is at 17.5 billion. They are now right around 1.5 billion from flipping. In a matter of days, they will be 1 billion away, and in a matter of weeks, they will see a flip. I do think this will be seen as a positive. I do think this is a positive catalyst. Seeing the largest fund in the Bitcoin spot ETFs that's known for selling being flipped by the runner-up, that's seen inflows for something like 72 consecutive days, finally broke its streak just the other day. But regardless of that, we are going to see IBIT flip GBTC, and I do think the market's going to see this as a big positive. Now, the rest of this video is pretty much going to cover the Bitcoin miners. We have a lot of earnings coming up. I'm going to mention a couple of them. I'm going to look at a couple of them's charts. And first off, I want to mention CleanSpark. They're expected to report their earnings on May 9th. And I wanted to show you that CleanSpark's still bullish. We're still above our 50 and 200 MA, but keep an eye on this roughly 1770 area. This is a potential level of support. It has been a resistance at times, and right now this is right where our 50 MA is. If we can sustain this and we don't break it, I do think we're going to see a bounce here. Be careful with these Bitcoin miners around earnings. We might see a little rally up ahead of earnings. If that's the case, I'd be very hesitant. I'd be very careful. At the same time, if we see these miners posting a profitable quarter for earnings, I do expect many of them to run. I also wanted to mention Iris Energy. Their earnings is approaching as well. According to TradingView, it's the 8th of May expected, but I don't think I saw that on their Investors Relations tab, so I'll be watching IRIN for their earnings. I'm not sure if it's going to be this date, but it is coming up soon. And I want to show you that IRIN has been just consolidating. We've seen these run-ups getting smaller and smaller, and we've seen these drops getting smaller as well. We're seeing this consolidation, prices tightening up. We're seeing lower highs, but we're also seeing higher lows. I do think earnings is the catalyst that's going to break this trend, for better or for worse. If earnings comes up bad, we're probably going to break this ascending support that we've been utilizing, and we might come down to our next ascending support that we've been utilizing since the beginning of the bull run for the Bitcoin miners. We have bounced off this point twice. If we do break this trend, this uptrend, we're probably going to head down to this uptrend, which will be just a hairline under $4 if we get a bad earnings. If we get a good earnings, I'd expect that we head to the top range of this pattern, and then we'd have to eye for a breakout. I'm very bullish on IRIN here. It's around 50% from its top. I just find it extremely ironic that a lot of these miners are literally right around 50% down. The Bitcoin mining rewards being cut in half has taken these Bitcoin miners' values in half. But that's okay, because IRIN is still up over 300% from its bottom back in 2022. And I do expect this overall uptrend to continue. Next, I want to talk about BTBT. There's a lot of confusion around this one. They're supposed to post earnings on Friday, according to TradingView. Now TradingView saying their earnings is coming out today. I would wait. I would look at BTBT's investor relations site. When I looked at it, I didn't see anything about earnings, so I don't think their earnings is coming out today, but I will be on the lookout for any news. This is another Bitcoin miner expecting a profitable quarter, and expecting very large growth in revenue, nearly $30 million in revenue compared to last quarter reporting $16 million. I think BT is definitely one to watch. They're getting into AI more and more. They're expecting 100 million annualized by this year end. So moving forwards after the end of this year, they should see over 100 million annualized from their AI revenue alone. And it's shaping up to be a larger portion than their Bitcoin mining, which honestly, I'm okay with that. But BTBT, in my opinion, does look like it's probably heading lower. We're facing our resistance on these two moving averages. We're under both of them. We did see our death cross. We're seeing lower highs, we're seeing lower lows. Keep an eye on this general direction. I do think this is where we're heading for the next couple of days. One thing I'm watching for a break to the upside is a break over the 50 MA and this previous resistance point, this roughly 240 area. It has been a bouncing off point before, and it has been a resistance before as well, a resistance area at least. So I'm keeping an eye on the 50 MA as well as this 240 area. And if we broke these, this would also be a potential break out of our downtrend, out of this kind of a descending channel, descending wedge. We also have Riot announcing earnings coming up as well. This is going to be May 1, Wednesday. This is the soonest miner to report earnings that I know of. I might be wrong. Let me know down below. Now, one thing I'm watching for on Riot is this potential gap fill down in the 9s. If we show any more weakness, I do think there's a possibility we head down there, and that would be a great point to buy some Riot, in my opinion. One thing with Riot right now is it does look like we're finding resistance on both our 50 and our 200 MA, and we did just recently see a death cross. Good earnings might shake us out of this, but otherwise I do expect us to head down, potentially fill our gap. But you know, Riot is another one I like when it's beaten down. I think in terms of the Bitcoin miners, this is seen as kind of a safer one, along with Mara. I'm not the biggest fan of Mara. I would prefer Riot personally. And this is another one I expect to do overall pretty well throughout this bull market. Right now, from its bottom, it's roughly 250% up. And from its 52-week highs, it's roughly 40-something% down. I do think times like these are the times to buy the Bitcoin miners. They're still heavily beaten down from the halving taking effect. The market saw the halving as a huge negative for the Bitcoin miners. I believe in reality it's a positive if you look at the big picture. And you know, when these miners are down, these are the times to take advantage of them if you are bullish on them as a whole. We are far from euphoric right now with the Bitcoin miners. If anything, we have a very negative sentiment right now. I also want to mention Marathon's earnings is coming up on May 9th. A lot of you guys are big Bitfarms fans. This is coming out on May 13th. For their earnings. Hut 8's earnings is expected May 15th, and Cypher is expecting their earnings on May 7th. I know I definitely missed out some miners, but what miners do you guys know are reporting earnings this week? They're definitely going to be worth keeping an eye on. From what I'm seeing, Riot stock has the closest earnings from now. So seeing some good earnings coming from the first few that report will probably set the tone as we get to the others reporting. So keep an eye on Riot and keep an eye on the Bitcoin miners that you don't necessarily hold. I do believe if they give good earnings, this will breathe a sigh of relief. This might give some positive sentiment as others are about to report. And of course, the first to report are going to give us some insight, some ideas on what the forward guidance will look like. And if we're seeing revenue beats, earnings beats left and right, it'll give us an indication that others that have upcoming earnings should do well also. But let me know what Bitcoin miners earnings you're watching out for. How do you think Hong Kong spot Bitcoin ETFs and Ethereum ETFs will affect the market? And what do you think of this Australia spot Bitcoin ETF news? Thanks as always for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.